For anybody who's listening who doesn't already know who you are, could you just give us a quick Cliff's Notes version of who Selene is?
I always struggle with that one because I don't know how far back to go. I've had many incarnations. Currently, I am the host of the Hit Play Not Pause podcast for active and athletic women in and beyond the menopause transition, and I am the content creator at Feisty Menopause, which I have a newsletter called Feisty 40 Plus, and we create lots of Instagram content at Feisty Menopause on Instagram, also on Facebook. Before that, I was a semi-professional mountain bike racer. I was a contributing editor to Bicycling Magazine for about 27 years, co-authored, contributed to, authored about 2 dozen books. I've had a long career in both writing, and in the coaching space. I'm also a certified personal trainer and a coach and all of those things. So that's me.
So your podcast primarily talking about menopause. This is the newest incarnation of your career. Why has this been where you've ended up now? Why is this so important to you?
Because I hit menopause. That's the really easy answer to
Yeah.
that. We did, we, going back, I co-authored a book with Dr. Stacy Sims, who is pretty much a pioneer and thought leader in the women-specific training and nutrition space. We wrote a book called Roar in 2016, and we had one chapter on menopause. It was meant to be a lifespan book for women, and we had heard out of the gate that one chapter was not enough on menopause, and we were both like, And then once we hit menopause transition ourselves, I was like, that those women were correct. We need another book. We wrote Next Level together, started this podcast, Hit Play Not Pause, got into Feisty Menopause. And it really was just at the time, it's hard to believe now because people weren't talking about menopause on Oprah, the New York Times, all of that, even in 2020. So at the time, when I was looking for information, there wasn't anything for active women. You could go on the internet and you would find you should exercise or you should eat well. And I kept thinking, okay, yeah, I'm on that. I'm racing my bike and I'm fueling myself. So I had been a journalist and a science writer for many years, as I still am, and I thought, if I don't know all of this stuff that I am learning through this book with Next Level, and I don't know what's going on with me or how to adjust my training or how to help myself, how does anybody else who's active know this? And I had seen women disappearing from start lines in their 50s, and I didn't quite understand it. And once I hit close to that myself, I did. So I thought this is very important work, and we have to get some messages out there.
For women like myself who are maybe not yet in perimenopause or just
Mhm.
like barely on the edge, what are some of the first signs that we should be looking for to know that we're entering perimenopause?
Yeah, some of the first signs are your period, but they're not necessarily your period. And some women don't have periods because they have IUDs or they're on birth control. So that gets really complicated very quickly. A lot of times those first signs are a bit subtle with your cycle. Your cycle might get a little longer, it might get a little shorter, it might get spaced out a bit. But more than that, women will see mood disturbances arising more. I wish I had known that anxiety was an early symptom of perimenopause. Waking up in the middle of the night feeling of impending doom. I hear that over and over and over. People start waking up in the middle of the night and they have anxiety, or they're starting to have some hot flashes in the night that they're not recognizing as such because it's just like heart palpitations that they're experiencing. So a lot of that kind of symptomology that you wouldn't necessarily put along with hormones can sneak up on women in ways that make them feel like, well, I guess life is just getting to me. I guess I'm just not handling things well when it's really their hormones are shifting, and your hormones affect so much more than your reproductive system. You have receptors in your brain, you have them all over your body, your muscles, and they're involved with your serotonin system and your cortisol system. So you can have a lot of these mood disorders, and women who are mountain biking, I'll hear all of a sudden they freeze with fear on a feature that
Mm.
they've ridden dozens of times. So those kind of things, when you start experiencing that, when you start experiencing, I tell people to keep track of how they're feeling in their training peaks or whatever your training log is. When you're starting to have more bad days than good days, your moods aren't there, things just aren't right, you aren't feeling like yourself, that's actually a medically recognized symptom of perimenopause or the late reproductive period, like women will just say, I'm not feeling like myself. So when you have that, you can start thinking, especially if you're in that mid 40 range-ish, you can start thinking hormones.
So what should you be doing before your mid 40s to make sure you're educated and prepared for when it does come?
Education is key. Yeah, I never want to make women feel afraid. Sometimes I'll get done with a conversation like this, and I'll hear from somebody that now they're terrified. And my intent is never that. My intent is just as I had saying, I wish I had known.
Yeah.
So, because as soon as I knew that what I was experiencing was hormonally driven, I felt better even before I had done anything else because I knew what the source was.
Yeah.
So, just knowing matters. So I just tell people just get educated about it. I don't want to necessarily plug my own book, but I have Next Level, and it is a book that it just takes you through what your hormones do as an active woman, all the systems that they help regulate, what you might feel. So when that stuff does come up in your life, and you're not bound to experience all of it, but when things start creeping up, you have those little flags that say, "Oh, I know what this is," and then you can go in about what actions you might want to take about it.
I think it's so nice too that now that there are more people talking about it and your podcast, um, that also not just only are you more educated and have more knowledge to know what's going through is normal, but also that you're not alone.
100%.
Right? I can't imagine what it would have felt like when people weren't talking about it.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right. So what in terms of cycling and training, what are some of like the most obvious first changes that need to be made?
I would say the big one that helps most women that I see is if they haven't started a resistance training practice, start a resistance training practice. Your estrogen and your reproductive hormones are also very intricately involved with your musculoskeletal system. That's why women's bone health deteriorates around menopause. They lose bone, they lose muscle, they lose muscle strength. And how I just put it for women is you want to think of it as you're stepping in where your hormones are going to be leaving off a little bit. And that's irrespective if you use hormone therapy. Hormone therapy seems to help some women with those musculoskeletal changes, but not necessarily all. So you need to do a little more work to help your body do some of that work that your hormones were doing for you in keeping your muscles, maintaining your muscle and bone strength. So I always tell start a resistance training practice. That's one of the things that 100% helped me most. Put power back in my pedals. I felt more like myself. It's also very good for your brain. I could go on and on about resistance training. Starting a mobility practice is also a good idea. I just buddy that up with my resistance training practice because, again, connective tissues, musculoskeletal system, it all needs more help as you go into this phase of your life. And then I would say, really honestly, for cyclists, you want to pay attention to what's going on in the vulvovaginal area because estrogen helps keep those tissues elastic, moist, healthy, thick, all of the things. And one of the early changes, like we were talking about, some women experience, some women don't experience till later, almost everyone will experience it at some time, is those tissues change. Those tissues go through a drying, they become more fragile, and some women have a lot of trouble sitting on their bike saddle for the first time, maybe. And it can be extremely uncomfortable. And I bang this drum all the time. I think vaginal estrogen should be over the counter. It is safe broadly for pretty much everyone, and it keeps those tissues healthy. It helps prevent urinary tract infections, which also become more common during this time. So pay attention to those tissues. If it's getting uncomfortable, talk to your doctor, get a prescription for vaginal estrogen. It is a really great thing. I do sort of think everybody should be on it at some point. There are also other products that you can get that have hyaluronic acid in them that are also moisturizers for that area, along with whatever chamois cream you might be using. Because if you're not comfortable in your saddle, I mean, we all know that's miserable. You're not going to ride.
So currently you have to go to your doctor to get a prescription.
You do, and that people are trying to change that, but yes, you do.
Yeah.
I really honestly, and then in some countries you can get it over the counter.
Is there a way to find a good doctor?
Yeah, you can go to your GP should be able to help you with that without too much prodding or pushback because it is so It's so safe. If you have trouble finding a GP, you can go to menopause.org, and they have all over the world, they have a practitioner finder feature, little box, plug in where you live, and you can find a menopause informed practitioner near you. All else fails, go online. MIDI Health, any of those online services are extremely, extremely good. You have somebody who knows what you're talking about and who can help you out from the comfort of your living room.
So we should be adding in strength training, more mobility work. What about on the bike training? I've heard a lot of conflicting advice about, you should be doing more high intensity. Oh no, you shouldn't be doing high intensity. You should be doing lower intensity. What's your take on that?
I have many takes on that. My first take on that is if what you're doing is working, continue to do it. You do not need to stop it. What happens sometimes is that people will say, I'm doing the same training that I always was doing, and that usually means a lot of volume. Not always, but often it means a lot of volume.
Mhm.
And I'm flat, I'm not getting faster, I'm going backwards. I hear all these things. So when I start to hear that, like sometimes it benefits women in this phase to polarize their training a little more. And that honestly is true for older men as well. Like you need a little bit more recovery. You don't want to lose that top end, but you don't absorb all that volume quite as well. And you already have it for a lot of people already have all those miles in their legs, as they say. So spending more time in that zone one, zone two, the easy base kind of pace rides, hitting those high intensities and spending a little less time in that gray area where you're kind of going sort of hard, but not enough to generate a true training effect on either end of the spectrum. Obviously, if you are racing, if you are training for a certain event, whether it be a gravel event or something longer, you're going to need to do some of that tempo, whatever work, but just a little polarization, a little more built-in recovery days tend to help.
Is there anything other than just taking those recovery days? Is there anything that changes in terms of like recovery methods?
Mm, I don't think there's any real magic there. I do think that you should pay more attention to your nutrition. Getting everybody, you can't turn around without hearing somebody talking about protein. But I will say we have a complimentary Facebook community of about 34,000 going on 35,000 women now. And one of the things I hear over and over and over again is that when women are struggling with their recovery, that when they start paying attention to actually hitting some of those higher protein marks, being 30 grams breakfast, 30 grams lunch, 30 grams dinner, so spread throughout the day,
Mhm.
they do find that they recover better. And I can attest to that to myself. I feel that way too. Again, your body, muscle protein synthesis, making that muscle, recovering that muscle becomes harder with midlife, with age, and with this hormonal changes. So you just need to give your body more of those things that it needs, the building blocks and the care to maintain that muscle and to make all those recovery and the repairs that you need.
What about on the bike? Any changes to on the bike nutrition?
Hmm. I mean, there are people who will say fructose becomes harder for women once they're in midlife or menopause. But that kind of stuff, honestly, I find so personal that I think that you need to just pay attention to how you're feeling. There is some evidence that the gut microbiome takes some changes during this time. We become a little more carbohydrate sensitive, the insulin resistance creeps up. And whether or not that changes what you do on the bike, is a very individual piece. So I would say pay attention. And if you are noticing that you are not responding as well to the nutrition that you've had, to work with somebody to dial it in for yourself. It's hard to do broad brushes, but things can change with age and with this hormonal transition.
I interviewed Christine Yu, who wrote Up to
Oh,
Speed.
yeah. No, I know
And
her. I'm
yeah,
in that book.
okay, yes, you are. But she talks a lot about how there's a lot of just missing science in terms
Yeah.
of, right? What in terms of perimenopause, postmenopause, what science do we not have right now that you would like to see?
That's hilarious. There's a lot of missing science. We're just starting. I just had on, and I'm blanking on her name. She does the period of the period. She's a Scottish researcher, Kelly McNulty.
Okay.
She she does a lot of work on invisible women in research, and there's something like only 6% of sports science are done on women, and of that 6%, I think it's like 9% that is masters women. It's a sliver of a sliver. right? There's a lot we do not know. So we have to infer a lot from basic science research, take what we can. We need much, much, much more on hormone therapy and its impacts on women's performance and on whether or not it helps keep the body composition in a healthier place. We need more research on all the stuff that we're talking about on training methods, if there is a better system for training women through perimenopause or postmenopause. I suspect it's going to be a long time before we find broad brushes more than we have, because what is very evident throughout women's lives is that we respond incredibly uniquely to both our endogenous and our exogenous hormones. By that, I mean the hormones that we make and the ones that we take. Some women have raging PMS. Some women get their periods and never feel anything. Some women are vomiting all through their first trimester of pregnancies. Other women aren't. Some women are barreled over by perimenopause. Others aren't. Some get raging headaches from hormone therapy. It's all over the map.
Yeah.
And it's that research is really, really hard to do. And people are now throwing testosterone into the mix. And where does that fit in? And there's so much to tease out. It's just going to take a long time. I do think in that respect, what we will see, maybe sooner than even all of that, is a way to take women through a precision medicine process where you can do some trial and error on yourself and maybe some tests, blood tests, whatever it may be, to see where you are best suited as far as what you need as in terms of hormones, in terms of nutrition, in terms of micronutrients and all of that. But that's medicine 3.0, 4.0. I don't know.
You had mentioned early on that you like having ladies put in their training peaks or wherever they're keeping a track of how they're feeling. And I'm also a big proponent of journaling everything, like
Mhm.
what you're eating. Is there anything else that you recommend journaling or tracking?
Just keeping track of your symptoms by and large, if you're in that perimenopause space, just to help you get the care that you need. We have a symptom tracker at feistymenopause.com. You can find them in almost any of the menopause societies where you can just go, and it's getting a little crazy. There's a white paper out with 103 different symptoms at this point. You don't need to go that into that minutia, but just find a basic tracker. Usually it lists about 30 or so symptoms, and look it over and keep track of it, because there are things that you might find that you're like, oh, I have been feeling that, but you haven't put two and two together. So just taking that time to look at a list like that, check off the things that affecting you, how much, the frequency, the severity of them, and then you have receipts that you can take to your practitioner and you can say, I have been more anxious, I have been more depressed, I have been more fearful, I have all over joint pain that I didn't understand. That's an increasingly recognized symptom of perimenopause, is this sort of all over joint and muscle pain. You can just have a whole laundry list of stuff, if you have a laundry list, I'm sorry, and take it to your doctor and, get the care you need.
Do active women experience menopause differently than the average woman?
It's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that, and I don't. I suspect that there is some benefit to it only because exercise is so good for us, right?
Mhm.
So we have a harder time with menopause managing our cortisol, managing stress. Cardiovascular health is a little harder to stay on top of, like I was mentioning before, insulin resistance, all of these things. And we know that exercise helps all of these things. We know that exercise is good for the brain, good for your blood sugar, good for your cardiovascular health, all of those aspects of your health. So 1 + 1 = 2. Logically, I would say yes, that someone who is active is already ahead of the curve in helping some of that, but it does not make you immune from the symptoms of menopause. It does not necessarily protect you from having your cholesterol rise, having your blood sugar rise, a lot of the things that people see once their estrogen starts to decline and it's not doing those works for you. So I always tell people, don't just assume that. Don't just assume that you are healthy because you're fit. That's not necessarily
Mm.
true. We see that in men too. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Go get your bones checked. Go get your blood work done. And I guess that is something that I would like to emphasize now that we're talking about that. Most of the guidelines recommend and insurance companies recommend that women get DEXA scans, bone density tests, starting at 65, which frankly I think is criminal because at that point all the horses are out of the barn.
Mm,
It's just it's so late. When we know I sit in the Menopause Society meetings and every single one of them, the bone health presenter stands up there and says we need to test women at menopause
mm,
because there's so much loss that happens in the 5 to 7 years around menopause.
mm.
If we catch it, there's so much we can do because hormone therapy is FDA approved. It's medically approved for the prevention of osteoporosis. So not checking women in that window makes no sense. I always tell people, even if you need to pay a little out of pocket, it's usually not too much. It's so worth it, especially cyclists. I have heard, and I had a woman, I interviewed her for my show, not an old woman at all. She was in her 40s and found out she was pretty high on the osteopenia, low bow density, borderline osteoporosis. She would
Mhm.
have never known that.
So this is something you can ask your doctor to order for
Yes.
you. Okay.
Yeah.
Going back in time, back to your fit chick bicycling column days when you were providing generalized fitness advice, is there
Yep.
anything in retrospect looking back that you're like, that was overly generalized and then knowing all these things I know now, I might not have recommended?
That's hilarious. Nobody has ever asked me that, but yes. Especially when I was writing for Bicycling, which was late 90s, early aughts, we were an 80% male readership. I'm not sure what it is now, honestly, but it was very high male. And I did not appreciate then. I didn't appreciate until I met Dr. Stacy Sims and started working on that project with her that all of the research had been done on men and that we knew so little about women.
Mhm.
And I was simply translating research done all on men
Yeah,
to the women that we had in our audience. And there's nothing I could have done about it then. I,
sure.
I wish I had known that because I would have probably at least expressed it. There were certainly things that we would recommend that men do that we now know might be more disruptive to women's health. A lot of espresso rides, long fasted rides, nutrition stressed rides, which, you have to be a little more careful when you have a reproductive system that is more sensitive to carbohydrate,
Mhm.
restriction and calorie restriction. I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that. And I wish I had because it is important. And it is important to know that if you are, and I still hear names I won't mention here, but big names who should know better saying that, well, when women get fit enough, they lose their menstrual cycle and you don't have to worry about it. You definitely have to worry about it. That is a health indicator. And when a woman is losing her menstrual cycle, she's losing bone. She's probably losing muscle. She's losing valuable assets to her well-being that she may not recover in her life if she loses it too much. So that kind of stuff is just really important. The knowledge that we have now on women and the menstrual cycle and how it impacts so much of our physiology is indispensable.
As more people have started talking about menopause, there's also just like so much more noise out there.
It's only going to get
Right,
louder.
right. Especially like on social media, it's just
Oh,
everybody has all these opinions and putting
I
all,
talk
all
about it all
this
the time.
misinformation. I personally follow Dr. Stacy Sims. I follow you. Is there anybody else that we should be following? Any other resources that you recommend?
Yeah, there's a woman I work with, Dr. Carla Di Girolamo. She is a CrossFit health coach. She consults with Wild Health. She's an endocrinologist and she specializes in women's physiology through this time. I can give you the name, it's a mouthful, but I can give you
Okay,
that if you want to put it in the show notes.
sure.
She's a good follow. That's probably my biggest go-to for that kind of physiology, I would say.
Okay.
There's a lot of because there is so much noise, I'm careful too. So it's for people in your audience, I would say I would just stick with the active people. You
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
On a personal level, how has biking changed for you as you've aged, and where do you kind of see yourself going from here?
That's been a real evolution for me, and it's been a pretty joyful one. It's taken ups and downs. So I didn't really start semi-professionally racing until I was 40. So I raced mountain bike stage racing all through my early to mid 40s, probably until about 47, 48. Got into gravel racing, did a lot of that. And it was a lot of pursuit of podiums. It was very serious. I did a lot of training. And at some point, I just wanted to do something else. I felt like I wanted to still do big long rides. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to do all of those things, but I just didn't care about podium pursuits any longer. It wasn't captivating to me. It felt like a chore. And it took me a while of sort of bumbling around to find a answer to what I was looking for, and eventually I found it in things like bike packing. We did the hut to huts from Durango to Moab, and I thought this is amazing because all of those years that I was racing in places like South Africa at the Cape Epic or Brazil, it was astronomical and it was amazing, but I always felt a little bittersweet because you couldn't stop and like look at something. You couldn't
Hmm.
stop and take a picture. There's so much of the time was spent in a cave staring at the wheel in front of you or all of that. And I I remember thinking, boy, someday I want to do stuff like this and be able to look around. And that has enabled me to still have a challenge because I like a challenge and I like training and I like pushing myself, but I wanted to put it to something else. And that has been a really nice evolution there. And I still do big rides, but most of them are surrounded around adventure.
You mentioned the books you've written. Is there any book that you haven't written that you would still like to tackle?
Yes and no. Stacy and I are talking about other book projects, perhaps. She is interested in talking about puberty and
Mm.
really addressing there's a really good understanding now with Lauren Fleshman's book she came out with Good for a Girl,
Hmm.
where she talked about how girls go through, unlike boys who hit puberty and have this sort of nice even trajectory in their performance, girls hit it and they have a dip, right? So they're all afraid of hitting puberty, but
Yeah.
then because you're putting on fat and your body's really, really changing in
Yeah.
ways that are not necessarily conducive to performance. And if we let them leave sport or we let them give up, boy, they miss some really great years because the
Yeah.
body settles in and those 20s and 30s, they can be magical, even into the 40s. So just helping hang on to those girls, I think is really, really important and
Yeah.
letting them understand that. I would like to see that come to fruition. And I'm working on a project with this woman, Dr. Vonda Wright. She's a longevity woman. I know Stacy's interested in that space too. Just talking a bit more. I think that is where we're going next is looking at what does it mean to age well as a woman? And I think menopause is a really very, very, very important part of that conversation because that's when pivots start to happen and your body demands to have attention paid to it. Then women live a long time. How can we help them live better? Because way too many of them live with disability, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I've got three final questions for you, but
Oh, okay.
first, what have I not asked you that you would still like folks to know?
I really like birding. That's one of the it's one of the things when I was thinking about I always now, Kristen, have a pair. I bought this, I treated myself to this ridiculously expensive pair of binoculars, but they're very small and they're very good and they fit in a jersey pocket. And I take them on almost all my rides now. And when I see an eagle or something very exciting in the sky, I will stop and I will enjoy looking at the birds. So I highly recommend it.
I love that. First question for you is what bike or bikes do you ride?
I have a lot of bikes that will surprise nobody, but I've been trying to cull the herd and give them away. I don't believe in having bikes I don't ride. So currently I have a Juliana Wilder. That's my cross country mountain bike that I love, love, love. It's so much fun to ride. I have a Specialized Crave single speed mountain bike it's not great in Pennsylvania where I live, but I have friends in Jersey where it's really flat and just a little rolly and it's really
Hmm.
fun there. I have a Rodeo Labs Trail Donkey, which is my bike packing bike, and it's got this beautiful custom paint job of a sunrise with birds flying up into the sunrise. I have an open upper, which also has a custom paint job, and that's like a faster, racier gravel bike. And I have a Live Envy, which is an aero road bike. And I have an e-bike that I ride errands on. It's got a bike
Yeah.
rack on. I think that's it. That's enough.
Second, it's quite a few.
That's funny. Yeah, never mind.
Um, Second question is, what is your favorite place you've ever ridden your bike?
I would say exotically, I'll give you two answers. Exotically, I would say Brazil was amazing because we did the Brazil ride. I raced that with Rebecca Rush, and the terrain was so varied. You would be in bamboo and then you would be in high desert and it was so beautiful and so remote. I really, really, really enjoyed that. But I am a big fan of my home state. I love Pennsylvania riding. It's rocky, it's challenging. You're in a tunnel of leaves or rhododendron tunnels, and I never get tired of it. I always, always enjoy it. And there's a place called Jake's Rocks that's a bit away that is one of my favorite places to ride a bike.
Final question is, what is your favorite thing about riding your bike?
It's so cliche, but I feel free. There's no other place that I feel I am meant to be. I really feel like I am meant to ride a bike because my earliest memories are riding a tricycle and dreams of riding a bike. I have always ridden a bike. And as soon as I sit on my bike and I start coasting down my street, a calmness comes over me and I
Mhm.
just feel centered and just it feels very free.